I came across this YouTube channel right over here. I don't know if it's pronounced Cwic or Cwic. I'm going to go with Cwic. And he's a real big fan of the papyrus font, but we won't make fun of him about that. His name is Greg Matsen, and he runs a YouTube channel and, discussing a myriad of different things.
So this week I had the honor of being showcased along with one of my episodes on the anti-Mormon channel Mormon Stories. That was quite a surprise. I kept getting all of these comments on that episode that they profiled. I thought that maybe a mass email went out to therapists or something because it was about a therapist topic, and with Natasha Helfer that I did earlier this year. So I saw all these negative comments coming up on that episode. I thought, wow, something happened here. It wasn't until a few days later that I realized someone pointed out to me that Mormon Stories had done a story on me and this episode. So that was pretty interesting. I disagree with a lot of the way that they profiled this, that they really framed the excerpts that they had in there. I will say this. I think that Natasha Helfer was very cordial in response. She had not seen the episode, so the clips were shown on this, and then she responded to the way that the host reframed the clip without context. And I have to say she was very cordial. I have reached out to her. I hope she responds. I would like to at least talk to her and have a conversation with her, whether or not she was willing to come on the show, because I'd be happy to bring her on the show. But I did not agree with the way that this was framed at all. But it's pretty interesting to be profiled in something like this and even have your name put into the title of their episode. Now, I've been invited by the host in the episode to come on to Mormon Stories. I don't know if that's something I want to do. And maybe if you guys could give me some feedback on this, if that's something I would even do. I don't know. I'm usually pretty pro-discussion, pro-dialogue, regardless if somebody agrees with me or not. I've had a number of people that are close to me who are kind of pushing back on that and saying, I don't know if that's such a good idea. Maybe I'd love to hear your feedback on that. Is that something I should do? Should I go on to Mormon Stories and talk with them at least about this episode here? I would appreciate your feedback. Also recently, we had the scholar Patrick Mason on the show, and I interviewed him about his recent book. We also talked about some of the issues where he has been referenced with the Washington Post and asked for comment in an article in Washington Post magazine in regards to the LGBTQ issues within the church. When I say issues, I'm talking about the doctrine. And this is something I've really tried to get out there, and that is, look, we need to really talk about the issue, because I think a lot of people that are waiting for a big change in that doctrine, I don't know that I think the most important thing here is to get the information out about what that change would mean. And this is for everyone. What is the change that would be required to happen? Would there be a huge change in theology? Is there a huge change in our affiliation, our connection with the Adam and Eve story? Is there a huge connection and change that would be required in the temple? Right? And I think all of those answers are yes. So why are we not talking about that? I think that we not only avoid those things when we talk about this issue, but we actually skirt around the issue of the doctrine in the first place. And this is what I've seen in so many podcasts and articles. It's not put out there. I think that the issue itself, when we talk about LGBTQ within the church, the issue itself is the doctrine of marriage, the doctrine of family. And that should be pointed out consistently, because that's really what the heart of all of this is. I think going back to Elder Holland's speech to BYU and the pushback that he got on that speech, and those that wanted to support his speech, what are we really talking about? It's not muskets. It's not valedictorians. The issue is the doctrine of the family, because that is where those that would be more on the progressive side of things, they're looking to change that. And so let's talk about that. What would that mean? These changes that happen sometimes, they need to be discussed in a way where these things are understood. What are the ramifications of a change in doctrine like that? And can the doctrine be changed? Having said that, let me go to a cut of that episode with Patrick Matsen.
This is the debate right now, and the discussion is that the doctrine, if we think about this as a series of concentric circles, right? There are some things that are just absolutely clearly in that core center circle, things that we can just count on as bedrock, right? That there's a God in heaven, that Jesus Christ is our Savior, right? That Joseph Smith was a prophet of God, the Book of Mormon is the Word of God, right? I mean, there's this handful of things that is clearly for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the middle of that circle. Is the doctrine of the family, meaning that marriage is only between a man and a woman, is that in the center circle?
Keep that in mind.
Or the next concentric circle out?
Woman.
That's the discussion and question that a lot of people have. We know that it has not always been the doctrine of the church that marriage is a union of a man and a woman. So the doctrine of the church has changed around marriage, not around the sexuality in marriage, but about the numbers within marriage. That doctrine has changed, and it's not just policy, it is doctrine. We could go to lots and lots of teachings from the prophets and apostles from the 1860s, 70s, and 80s. So that doctrine of the family and doctrine of marriage has changed.
Okay, so something I wish that I would have said at the time is, has it really? Has the doctrine really changed? He goes on to say that the proclamation of the family, which shows that marriage is between a man and a woman, and the practice of polygamy, of plural marriage, in the past in the church are already doctrines that are in contention with one another. But let's look at the doctrine on this. He says it's about numbers, right? It wasn't about sexuality. It wasn't about same-sex marriage in the past, and that's not what's changed, that it's numbers that have changed. But I think that when you really look at it, that's not true, right? Marriage, plural marriage, is not about one man and numerous wives that are within a marriage. That is not what a marriage is, right? When you have a marriage in plural marriage, let's say back in the 19th century, right? You have a wedding, you have a marriage between a man and a woman. That is the marriage. The women are not married to each other. And then you have another marriage with that man and a different woman, a man and a woman. And so it has I know maybe I'm going into nitpicking this, but it seems to me that the doctrine itself is always the same. It is between a man. A marriage is not about how many. A plural marriage, in other words, does not mean, you have one man and then numerous women and they get married all together, right? Marriage was between a man and a woman. So the numbers were not within a marriage that were different in the past with plural marriage. The numbers were the number of marriages that happened. And if there's pushback on that, I would love to hear it. I want to hear what you have to say about that. But the doctrine itself seems to me to be consistent then, that it is between a man and a woman. So that's another point, another topic that I think needs to be parsed out a little bit more and discussed a little bit more. And by the way, I really appreciate Patrick coming on and talking and going over his book and talking about these topics, which are not, my word, parsed out enough. There's not enough of a discussion on that. So I really appreciate that he came in, even though I don't agree with him on a number of those things. I appreciate that he came on the program and was willing to talk about those things. And lastly, we did an episode on the removal of the Thomas Jefferson statue in New York City. This is, again, there's pushback on this also. For me doing this episode, I think that for many, this is not a very big deal. Big deal. What does that have to do with someone who's in Arizona or California or Florida, etc.? Why does this matter? It does matter, right? Because this is the same mentality that has been pushing for these things, the 1619 Project, for example, where it's not just a matter of erasing history, so to speak, although there's something to that. It's a matter of values. That's really what we're looking at. And I think that when you look at these types of fights that are going on in America today, that's what we need to look at. What are the values that we're putting up above other values? For example, you have the congressman, the state congressman in New York, who makes the comment that it's about time that we got rid of the Thomas Jefferson statue. This guy's parents were immigrants to the United States. So here's the question back to him. Why did they come here? Why would they come to a place that is so horrible and so full of these microaggressions everywhere with statues of people that had slaves, 300 years ago, 250 years ago? Why would they come here? Well, I will tell you that one of the major reasons they come here is because of that man, Thomas Jefferson, because of what he implemented. That's why there is success here. We need to keep those things together and understand that what the founding fathers produced here through many of the tenets of the Enlightenment, combined with the idea of being created in the image of God, in other words, the individual matters, then those tenets and put into our founding documents of the Declaration of Independence, which Thomas Jefferson wrote, and into the Constitution, and then heavily influenced by Thomas Jefferson in the Bill of Rights, those are from him, right? He is one of the major players, perhaps the major player in terms of ideology and in terms of political expertise and construction of things in the founding of America. And there may not be another figure outside of George Washington that represents the founding of America. So keep that in mind and that understanding. That's why they're doing that. That's why they're pulling that down. It's not just because of slavery. That is what they can put out there. It's the same idea with critical race theory. Critical race theory is not just about race, right? Critical social justice is not just about intersectionality and people's sexuality. There is a political chassis below all of that is more important than anything else, more important than race or anything else. Race or sexuality in critical social justice is simply the make and model of the car or the color of the car, right? What is inside of it, the motor and the chassis down below that are moving everything forward, is a political agenda behind that. Slavery with Thomas Jefferson is simply the make and model. These are political agendas, and that's what you have to keep in mind when you look at what is happening here. It is not just a slippery slope, right? It is a movement of values, a political agenda above, moving down the political agenda of the idea of America, the freedom in America, the opportunity given to you in America. Liberal democracy. That is what is being fought over here. It is something much, much deeper than a statue. And every little fight that is lost, like the statue, means that we're moving closer and closer to those values shifting. The new political agenda of a breakdown of liberal democracy, and then liberal democracy being lowered further and further. That's the fight. And if you mistake that and think it's just about race, or it's just about statues, or it's just about history, then you're missing out. I'll talk to you next week.